Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. The Designing Hollywood podcast show is dedicated to all things movies, the movie industry, and its talented professionals. Today's episode is sponsored by the Eastern Costume Company. Our guest today is a costume designer who is repeatedly creating visually stunning looks for today's most innovative and compelling motion pictures and television series. It has allowed her to cement herself as the go-to costume designer for gritty, realistic depictions of iconic characters, subcultures, and genres. After getting her start as a costumer on the critically acclaimed FX series The Shield, she was tapped by Kurt Sutter to develop the look that sparked a fashion phenomenon with the wildly popular biker gang drama, Sons of Anarchy. Through Sons, Kelli not only brought unquestionable sex appeal to the characters, but also garnered a Costume Designers Guild nomination in the prestigious Best Contemporary Costume Design category. Capitalizing on the popularity of her highly original take of the motorcycle gang style, she developed a Sons of Anarchy clothing and jewelry line that sold directly to fans via FX Network's website. These signature designs and point of view were not lost on the producers of the motion picture thriller Homefront, who picked her to create the looks for stars Jason Statham and James Franco, Winona Ryder, and Kate Bosworth. More importantly, success on Sons also attracted the attention of mega producers Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, as the two chose her to design one of the most successful biopics of all time in the 2015 smash hit Straight Outta Compton. The success of Straight Out of Compton cemented her status as one of Hollywood's most sought-after designers and led to a string of big-budget films such as 2016's Power Rangers, David Ayer's Netflix smash hit Bright, and ultimately Marvel's Venom, which grossed almost $900 million worldwide. She also designed the Gerard Butler movie Greenland, which opened number one at the box office in 27 countries during the pandemic, as well as the Jamie Foxx vampire success Day Shift, with sequels to both currently in development, as well as Samaritan, Sylvester Stallone's first foray into playing a superhero. Additionally, she has designed the highly anticipated biopic Naiad, starring Jodie Foster and Annette Bening, which is currently in the running for an Oscar, and directed by Oscar winners Jimmy Chin and Chai. She also recently reunited with David Ayer and Jason Statham for their upcoming big-budget action movie, Beekeeper. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to welcome costume designer Kelli Jones to the Designing Hollywood Show.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to have been asked. So, yeah.
Before we started recording, I found out you were from Portland. I, too, am from the P&W, being from Seattle. I spent a lot of time in Portland growing up. A very sort of both a fashion-forward and a fashion-backward city all at the same time. You know, you had the funky hippie styles, rock and roll. You had all the different styles in Portland growing up. So was fashion something, or the motion picture industry, something that attracted you? And how'd you get into it?
I always have been into fashion and a fan of fashion, even when I was a teenager and growing up in Portland, always really, kind of exploring the next weirdest thing. Cause back then it was all about keep Portland weird. And I just migrated south after high school and ended up in LA, and I had a clothing line. I had a jewelry. I taught myself how to sew. And then I also made jewelry. I soldered jewelry and I did beadwork. And I just was like, I hit the street in LA. I was in my early 20s. And I basically just sold from store to store at Melrose, and then they would sell my stuff. And first it was consignment, and then my stuff sold pretty well. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I ended up meeting a couple of film directors just through the social circles. And one of them was Jerry Zucker. And wow. I didn't really know. And him and Janet, his wife, kind of like, tried to, like, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was still like super young. And I was talking to them about it, and they said, well, you're in LA now. Like, why don't you parlay the jewelry making and the clothing that you're making, the bags that you're making into movies and TV? That's the industry. That's what's here. So they introduced me to I had a phone call with Ellen Mirojnick, who, and I don't even think she would remember this. And she, at that time, I think they called her because she designed a movie for them, Rat Race, or I think she designed several, but that was a movie they were working on at the time. And she called me and said, sure, like if you'd like to PA, she was going to give me a PA position. And at that point, I didn't even know anything about costume design. I was so young, and I didn't realize, okay, well, you can become, I just thought to myself, what's the quickest way to get in and to do what I want to do? And at that point, I also heard about getting into the union and then working on shows that way. And so I ended up making, it was very hard to get into the unions or get into the union houses to get your days. And so I ended up getting it into one of the houses and got my days that way. And then that's how I worked on the Shield. So my very first job getting the days was working on the Shield. Again, very young, very green. Kurt Sutter was the writer. And so and that's what I love about Hollywood, because if you can stick it out long enough, you'll all rise up together. You know what I mean? Like Kurt was a staff writer. I don't even think I talked to him more than once or twice on set. And The Sons was the first series that he did. And at that point, the first movie I did after The Shield was with Walt Goggins, who was a producer actor in the movie Crystal. And I only did that because I was his set costumer. And I was so young. I just said, listen, I can design this. Like, let me design this. So he introduced me to the producers and the directors and then Billy Bob Thornton. And they said, sure. And it was low budget, non-union, low budget. I had one person helping me. And then it just kind of went from there. So that's kind of how I clawed my way in, but you also kind of fall into it. I did a lot of projects for free in the beginning. And then, Sons of Anarchy was not my first series. I think I'd done like 6 or 7 before that. That just weren't as successful. And so Sons was kind of like the big thing. So blah, blah, blah. That's how it started. So, yeah.
Well, to me, it's interesting, like you're describing. I've tried to explain that to people too, that I think people have this idea that they're going to come to Hollywood and immediately be in the position they want to be in. And I've always said to people, look, my first job was a PA. I didn't know what the job entailed. It was for the art department. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And basically, if you had a great attitude, you were there early. You never show up on time. You always show up early. and you just make yourself available and be easy to work with and do what you're told and get your job done. People want to bring you along. Yes, and it's hard, like you just described, you make yourself useful. When you were making jewelry and clothes, did you have any formal training? Like a lot of costume designers I've talked to went to school for like art. They studied art history or something. Were you self-taught? I was self-taught. I mean, long story. I left home pretty early, pretty young. And I self-taught. I had to do something. Right. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I was always interested in. So, and I was always around fashion in one way or another. So and when I got to LA, I just realized, okay, which direction do I want to take? And I certainly didn't want to be an actor. I think I took one acting class and it was videoed. And I remember then that the teacher, because, you moved to LA, act, okay. And I remember the teacher showed us the video that he took of whatever scene I did. And immediately I'm like, that's not for me. Because I'm so critical of myself. I just thought, no way am I going to be in front of that camera. Well, it's good that you made that choice. A lot of people, years later, never figure that out.
No, and it just didn't feel right. Nothing felt good about doing a scene with I don't know, to me, it's not in my bones. And like a lot of people here, when it is, then it just like really hits and they're amazing. And I just would have made a fool of myself. So that was not for me. But
you became a costume designer pretty early on. Like you've had that title for over 2 decades now. Yeah. When you first started, what was the transition like when you were designing individual pieces or designing for specific actors to actually taking over the reins on being the costume designer, the overall costume designer on a whole project? What was that transition like for you?
Well, the craziest transition was to go from doing my own jewelry and bags and some clothing. And again, I did not sell it. It's not like I had a company. It was just me doing it on my living room floor. And then going to do set costuming, because that was costume housework, is basically just restocking. Right. And I did it in 30 days. I was in and out. And then going to, work on set. I think to date, working on set of everything I've done is the hardest. I mean, I would be there. The Shield would shoot splits every week. So I would get to work at 4:42 in the morning on a Monday, and I get home at dawn on Saturday. And it was a show. It was one of FX's first shows, if not the first one. So they didn't have any money. So it was me and one other person. There was no trailer costumer. There was no costumer for day players. It was me and one other person. And the designer was doing multiple shows. So it was really, I rarely saw her. So it was the supervisor who would bring us the stuff. So I kind of learned quickly everything, like a little bit of everything. And then, I mean, here's what I have to say about like people, because I've had a lot of people asking, how'd you get into it and stuff. And what I have to say, it's sort of like the same with betting. Like my husband and I dabble in sports betting just because it's fun. And when we're bored and we love football, you're going to lose 100% of the bets you don't do. And so when it comes to costume design, you're going to not get 100% of the jobs that you don't ask for.
Right.
Especially in the beginning. So in the beginning, I would just email. I emailed anyone I knew. I would call. And I think how I got my first break was Walt Goggins. Again, I was the person that set his socks at 4:42 in the morning and then would pick up his clothes at night. But, you get a rapport with the person and that, you're spending so much time on set with everybody. And I think I saw him at a yogurt shop and he was walking out and he's like, well, I'm getting ready to go to Arkansas and I'm going to do this movie. I won an Oscar for the short and now we got some funding, a couple $1 million to the movie. And I was just like, I just said it. I said, can I design it? I mean, and I think some people are not used to being that forward. I just said,
right.
Can I design it? And he looks at me, he said, actually, maybe, like, I think the director's talking to someone, but if you want, I can introduce you. So I was introduced to Ray and Lisa, who were the producers of the couple that's in charge of it. And I just really hit it off with her. And then I hustled. I didn't care if I made any money. I didn't care if I wanted it to look right. I pulled favors. I got a girlfriend who assisted me. And that movie ended up within the movie turning union. So then that movie got some traction. It went to Sundance. So then I don't know. And then it ebbs and flows. And then, but I do have to say this. I remember listening, I forgot maybe it was like someone like Jane Fonda giving a talk about being freelance in this industry. And I don't care what level of freelance you are. When you're working and it's hard, you feel like it's never going to stop and you're never going to be done working. And when you're not working, you feel like you're never going to work again. Yeah. Like it's just one of those feelings. And so I would always have that in my mind of, I got to keep hustling to get the next job and I also tried to be what you said, just pleasant to be around, nice. And I also didn't take I would never bite the hand that feeds me. I never tried to take a job from a designer that was doing the project that I'd worked with. That's just not because what goes around comes around. I'm huge on that. So, so that's kind of how it went. And then again, like no one knew Sons of Anarchy. I mean, that really is like the platform of how I started to do bigger stuff because no one thought that show was going to be so successful. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And what a great show it became. But that's true of a lot of, when people get into the industry, sometimes everybody wants to win an Academy Award. Whatever movie they're working on, it's the greatest movie ever made. I mean, you have that mindset. But Sons of Anarchy was one of those shows, it started slow, like every show does, and then the quality and the people involved and the storylines, the writing staff, turn it into something great. And that show became a zeitgeist show. It became a huge, huge show. Now, when you're working on something like that, does the pressure increase season after season? I mean, obviously, it's not like they're going to be wearing Armani suits at some point. What are you going to do? You can't wear that on a motorcycle, But when it got more and more successful, did you get more money for the budget, and were you able to do different things?
No. No. Not only did I not get more money for the budget, I didn't get more money. My crews did no, there was absolutely no money. And this was before the time of, I don't think Instagram was around, Twitter was around. And so this was before the time where it was so in everybody's faces all the time. So besides Twitter and like seeing Instagram came out, I think right towards the end, like the last 3 years. But just because it wasn't so in your face, social media, likes, like there wasn't, I didn't feel any more pressure. We also just had so much fun on that show. Like there was just so much fun on that show.
Right.
It was crazy.
Well, then it's interesting. So you were on that for the entire duration of the series.
Yep.
And then you were offered Straight Outta Compton. What was that like when, having Ice Cube and Dre come out to you and say, would you do, because were they fans of the show?
So here's how this happened, which is to me, it was crazy. So that's a little before my time. I knew of like the Chronic, and I knew Dre and Cube's work during that era, but the NWA I was a little young for that. And I remember my husband used to work for Rolling Stones in New York. So I remember one time laying around and I just saw an email that, they want to meet you for NWA, Straight Outta Compton, this movie. And I just looked at my phone and I'm like, what? And I look at my husband, he goes, oh, you're doing that movie. He's like, you're doing that movie. Because he also was one of the guys that started Maxim. And so he just like was really kind of in that scene in New York, just the music scene there. And so he kind of talked to me about it. And then I really did a deep dive research. I met with Gary. And I don't know, it was I still didn't understand why I was getting asked to do that movie. Because I think I'd only done one movie before. And then just one successful TV shows and a couple other TV shows. And I don't know, he just was very like, he would just like study me as I was in this meeting. And I just brought a bunch of pictures of NWA, how I would do their day-to-day life. And then just some of the pictures of stuff I've done. And what I didn't realize until I was sitting there, that how I dressed Sons of Anarchy, some of those similar to NWA. And I had no idea. I didn't understand. I didn't know that some of the silhouettes of like what Charlie would wear and the shoes and the jeans. And I just thought, And then all of a sudden Gary told me he was a big fan of Sons. He rode motorcycles, the director, huge fan of Sons. So, I mean, I do have to be very honest about this. So at the very end, it was, I don't know how many designers that they met with, but it was like between me and Ruth Carter. And Ruth Carter, who's a legend.
I've interviewed Ruth.
So, and I don't know, I'm pretty sure she knows this because she was in the conversation. She was finishing Selma I believe it was Atlanta. And the movie, at the time that I did the interview, that movie was in process to get made for, I think, 10 years. And so by the time the ball was really rolling, the prep time was about 5 weeks. And from when I was interviewing to when they were going to start, maybe 6 weeks from when I interviewed to when we were going to start shooting. And she had, I think, 3 scenes to establish still in Atlanta. And so she couldn't come back. She had to like have someone like kind of work for like a week. There would have been like a week lapse. She couldn't come back. And I think then the conversation was like, do we want Ruth? Do we want Kelli? Well, she can't do the full prep. Kelli's here. And I mean, they clearly saw something in me. And so they're like, yeah, let's hire Kelli. So I was hired on it. So yeah, I mean, I just have to thank Ruth for not leaving Selma.
Well, she did that Ruth Carter. She's done okay for herself. Yeah. She's amazing.
And yeah, I mean, the very first meeting I had on that was in it was in Dre's recording studio. Up in the valley, and it was a little surreal. So it was just like me and Cube and Dre and Gary and Shane Valentino, the production designer, and the producer Adam Miram. And we just sat and watched these crazy videos of stuff that you just don't see online, like some of these cool videos of like some of the pool parties, and it's just some footage that they had. And
right.
And I remember Dre at one point, because it starts in 1985, I think, in the mid 80s, and he just looks at me. He's like, I don't give a shit that it's fucking 85. I just want you to make me look cool. I'm like, so if I didn't look cool, he's like, the mid 80s doesn't look cool. So if it doesn't look cool, like, let's figure out a way to make Dre, the whole movie, look cool. And I was like, I bow down, let's do it. So yeah, that was a hard movie, but it was a lot of fun. Again, it was a lot of fun.
I love that movie. I mean, I thought it was great. You guys did a great job. It was a lot of fun. Now, after that, I look, so our audience, science fiction, fantasy, horror, comic book movies are kind of the bread and butter of our main channel on YouTube. And you have done a lot of really, first of all, the Power Rangers movie, while it might not have been, I thought it was great. Like Power Rangers was I was a little too old for the show, but I went and saw that movie, and I thought that movie was going to make $1 billion.
I know, it's kind of brag.
But it was good, though. I mean, it was I thought the design work was great. So when you go from something like Straight Outta Compton, and then you transition over to Power Rangers, you know, which you had decades worth of various iterations of the Power Rangers. What was that like for you? And how do you go from, you know, making your jewelry and then dressing the character, dressing young Dre and Cube, you know, and having the actual guys overseeing what you're doing, to then transitioning to the Power Rangers? Was that a hard thing for you to do? And how was that?
In a different way. And again, like, I'm just like, I don't try to take credit where it's not mine. I'm very open with everything. And so with the Power Rangers, I had done a show. I was doing a show called Rosewood, and it ended up being the same producers that did the Power Rangers and the movie. And so something happened. They were about 5 or 6 months out, hired someone up in Canada to design it. And I don't know, something didn't work out. And so the producers, you know, they liked what I did on Rosewood. I think Straight Outta Compton had just come out. And so how it was presented to me was meet the director, Dean, who I adore. And what had happened, though, is that the production designer had started a year before. And sometimes with these kind of movies, I don't know if that happens still, the production designer is the one who does the production designer and the builder, Weta, are who do the concepts for these Power Rangers. Because I mean, okay, so now because I've done superheroes since then. I did Sly and I did.
I know.
So now I go into a superhero movie. I know exactly what to do, but I got to tell you, doing those costumes versus any other costume, thank God I didn't go in and had to build these from scratch, because I went in there, I had to learn the manufacturing process and literally building these materials from nothing, like 3D building that Weta did for the suits. And I was able to talk to the studio. They couldn't get their heads around Rita Repulsa. And all we had for these Power Rangers were images, were really large illustrations, which did not scale to a human being. And the girls were all, I think, under 5'4", and the boys were all 6 feet. And I had to kind of go with the director, and I was looking at rocks and just being like, okay, what should this material be made of? What should it look like? And what should the shine be? So at that point, I was able to talk, I think it was Lionsgate, into letting me take a stab at Rita Repulsa. I'm like, okay, now I had 8 months to prep this movie. And now that I've figured out and like really learned quickly how to build these superhero suits, can I do it for Rita Repulsa? And I did some illustrations. I had them done, and they loved the look. And so then I started to build, like then it went from the base up into the costume that I built. But yeah, those actual Power Ranger suits, the illustrations were already done. So that made it easy for me. It's kind of like, you know, then I'm not just in the deep end, because I think a lot of people that I know in this business, every job they get, if it's a big job, they feel they're going to fail. Like, I think if you don't feel you're going to fail at what you're doing, you're not maybe doing the right thing. Because I think it should always build this fire in you of like really trying your best. So that's kind of, I got very lucky that it wasn't like, you know, the producer was like, oh, here's the Power Rangers movie, meet the director. And he's like, yeah, sure, you're hired. Then let's build a superhero suit. I'd be like, what? Like, do I go to ISW for that? Like, I would have had no idea.
By the way, shout out to Elizabeth Banks.
Oh my God, I love her.
I've got to ask you, like, I was like, how did they get Elizabeth Banks to be Rita Repulsa? How did they do that?
It was a lot of different A-list names that they were thinking of. I think at one point it was Sandra Bullock, and then I mean, I don't know. Elizabeth Banks took the reins, and she is just badass. And then you just don't know, because those costumes were pretty revealing. And you know, the thing about superhero costumes is you don't get multiple fittings. You get one fitting, and you get that one fitting sometimes about a week before it shoots, and that costume is $1 million. So they have to look, she wasn't hired when the illustrations were getting approved. So she didn't even know what this thing was going to look like until pretty much it was made. And I think I had Legacy make hers. Weta did the suits, but Legacy made hers. And so, it's a little revealing and a little sexy, and the whole thing when she was supposed to have been the Green Ranger, so it's green. And I remember the first time I met her, I think it was at Legacy, and they were doing up her makeup and stuff. And I showed her these images, like, oh, so this is going to be the costume that's coming that you're going to try on in a couple of days, because they were almost finished. And she was just like, yeah, whatever. She's like, sure. She goes, as long as you can't see my ass, I'm fine. I'm like, thank you. So no, you couldn't see her ass. Like, I'm not going to do that to her. So yeah, she was great.
I mean, it was a lot of fun. I would like to have seen a sequel. I was hoping that movie would be successful. They'd make a lot more because it was fun. But then, again, you've worked on some really interesting things, like Bright, that David Ayer. That was the first time you worked with David Ayer. Bright was a big Netflix. It was Netflix, right? It was Netflix. Big Netflix movie that cost a lot of money. They're putting a lot of money into it. Big stars. You had Max Landis, John Landis' son, celebrated script.
Yeah,
and then you're dressing orcs. Magic-wielding monsters in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Again, maybe your work with Rita Repulsa was set you up for that, but what was it like to get something like Bright and starting to work with a director now that you've worked with multiple times?
Yeah.
What was that project like for you, and what was it like to dress an orc?
Well, first of all, the project was, here's the thing. I remember one time in Straight Outta Compton, Dre and Cube were all in the trailer, and I have like all these pictures of fittings and like, what do we want? Eazy-E or Jason needed to be in 5 changes in that hour. And so they're picking, and it's just such chaos. I remember one time Dre looks at me and he goes, just think, Kelli, no movie will be as hard as this one. Every other movie you do after this is going to be so fucking easy. And I thought that was going to be true in that moment until I got Bright. And then I did Bright. And it was the first time working with David. He actually loves Straight Outta Compton and some of the stuff he loves, Sons of Anarchy. And you get the movies because of the past projects that you've done.
Yeah.
And so but we're building a world there. So, and the world was this elevated reality where you're walking around with orcs. So the one thing is, besides the actual fat suits that we had to make, and I believe they were silicone, we just dressed them like a kind of fantasy version of a gangster. So really it wasn't, the hard builds for that were some of the, like Numi and all the elves and stuff like that. And most of those were just in brocade suits that we made, like we'd get fabric or we would make print fabric. But yeah, so the orcs were actually a lot of fun because they were just in like big jerseys. So we would make all those jerseys and it was fun.
One of the things about that movie too is the cast is great. Numi Rapace, you had the girl with the dragon tattoo. You had Will Smith. You had Joel Edgerton in that movie. Edgar Ramirez, right? Edgar Ramirez.
Yeah.
What a great cast. Now, what's it like when you come on? Now you're working with Will Smith, one of the great superstars of movies, who has this great career behind him. When you work with, do you have great rapport with actors? Is that something? Were you ever intimidated by the people that you work with?
No, intimidated, no, because you just can't be. Like, right. The fact is, you walk into these rooms and you have to make people with very big lives in the entertainment industry immediately trust you with what you're going to put on their body and what they are going to be going on screen with. And they're all very smart. So any sort of like nervousness or intimidation, it'd be like, then they wouldn't trust me.
Right.
It would be a situation like you just can't. I've never felt it, and even if I feel it, like can't show it. So I've always had a pretty good rapport with most of the actors that I worked with. I just take it all very, it depends. I take my cue from the director. So, because really, ultimately, it's their film. Like, right. I'm there to facilitate the vision that they've had for a film that they've probably been working on or thinking about for years, if not a decade, before I even got involved. So I want to bring my own style, my own vision, mesh it with theirs. Someone like David is in all those fittings. So he is 100. He is in the fittings from start to finish. He sees everything, he sees down to the shoelace what the actor is going to look at, so that he is going to say whether or not he even wants Will Smith to look at that. Because if David doesn't love it, he doesn't want the actor to see it.
Right, sure.
Because it's his vision. And then there's other, Ruben from Venom. Then there's the other directors. It's another Tom Hardy and Michelle Williams, big stars. He doesn't want to have anything to do with the fittings. Like, he's like, you do your job, just show me the pictures. So you just have to kind of like, I don't know, kind of figure out what vibe you need to go with. But yeah, so I don't get intimidated, because that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about what the director wants.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about how can I immediately make someone who is probably, pretty like, hands off to a lot of people they don't know in real life, because so many people want a piece of them. How do I immediately make this person trust me? And that's how I walk into all the fittings. And I mean, I would say 95% of the time it works. And I don't actually think there's been really anyone that is just like, okay, this is not going to work. It's not that it hasn't been hard, but there's things, it's just normally it works. So.
Right. Well, and then also Venom, working at Sony, they own the Spider-Man.
Yeah.
They control the rights to Spider-Man. Venom was a big film for them. You're working with Tom Hardy. It's an effects-heavy movie. And now suddenly you're finding yourself, you're working with creatures on Bright to go, well, Venom's one of the ultimate creatures, I guess. Yeah. So what was that like for you to then, I mean, you're working your way up both in terms of budget and in terms of schedule and in terms of, I guess, studio maybe breathing down the neck of the production. Yeah. What was that like moving as you're slowly moving your way up to all these very cool projects with cool people? But when you wind up on a Venom movie that's, it's going to be a tentpole, the studio has expectations. Did that affect how you did your job?
No, I mean, I guess at that point there's just more pressure. Like when you were asking about Sons of Anarchy, like did it feel more pressure throughout the seasons? It's like no, because we were all kind of like a family back then. When you go onto a movie and you're meeting everyone for the first time, the bigger the movie, the more pressure. And with some exceptions, you think that there's more money. You think the ladder goes up the same way, but it doesn't. So the pressure gets higher and sometimes the money gets lower. Not the money for the movie, the money for costumes sometimes.
Right.
Because that movie, the character's CGI. So Venom is CGI. So I didn't have to do anything with Venom. So it was Tom Hardy and it was the rest of the cast that I had to like build this world for. So yeah, but the pressure of it was very high because again, I didn't even realize this until recently, pretty much with almost all the films I've done, the idea is not to do one. The idea is to do multiple films.
Right. Sure.
So the pressure to do that first one to where it can prove that this is going to be a franchise and to really like put a look on it that's special and different, then yeah. So that's, I think what happens is the bigger the movie, it's more stress.
and it was, I mean, Venom was a huge hit.
Yeah.
So, now, when a movie hits like mm-hmm. that, and do you like that because do you get to up your quote? Do you get to get more of what you want? Do you get to make more multiples? You get more money? You get to hire more people? Does a hit affect you?
Isn't that funny that that's what people would think? I remember one time my husband was talking to his friend in New York, one of the writer friends that he had, and he said something about like, he knew the movies I'd done. I think it was right after Venom. And he was like, well, yeah, but doesn't Kelli make like $1 million a year? My husband was like, no. So it's like, you would think, I mean, our category can get nominated for one of the top awards in the industry, but no, not necessarily. And I think why is because each movie, even if it is an Oscar-nominated movie, always has a set budget. So, I mean, normally has my rate gone up since Venom? Yes. But there have been projects, including there was Naiad, my agent was told that movie was part of Netflix's independent. It's now like their independent kind of awards division that was new at the time.
Right.
And movies are not big budget. So when they call my agent and they ask to meet with me, they say very clearly, like, this is what we have budgeted. So let her know that. And then you can tell us whether she wants to meet, because this is it. And then you can make a decision. So it really just depends. Like, I think, if I did, and also it just depends. But no, not necessarily. As much as you would think, everything goes up.
Well, I was going to get, since you brought up Naiad, I mean, Jodie Foster has been one of my favorite actors, I think, since I saw her in Candle Shoe when I was a little kid, the Disney movie Candle Shoe, and back in the 70s. I love Jodie Foster. And then Annette Bening. I mean, Annette Bening in Bugsy, where she worked with her husband, Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
I love her. I've always loved Annette Bening, and you've got these two just powerhouse actresses. Is some of the reason that when you take a movie, does it have to do with the people that you're going to be dressing? Were you interested in taking Naiad because of who was in it?
Yes. And yes. I mean, at that point, sometimes I take a movie and I don't know who's going to be in it. Sometimes there's like whispers and it's like, it hasn't really been solidified yet. But yeah, I mean, there is, to me, I've been watching Jodie Foster and Annette Bening since I can't even remember. And just to have those two legends together, and then the story they were telling, which up until I think 4 weeks into me prep, I didn't even realize that Diana Naiad didn't like get out of the boat in the middle at night. And I'm like, wait, she swims the whole way. Like, she swims it. I didn't even, like, it was such a crazy story.
Yeah.
And even though I'm reading the script, I'm thinking at one point I said, wait, she doesn't get out of the boat to sleep. And they're like, no, that's the whole point. And she just goes through. So it was them. It was the directors. I mean, I don't know. I just clicked immediately with Shai and Jimmy when I met them on the Zoom, and just their movie Free Solo is
so good.
Unbelievable. And I thought, if anyone can tell this story, it's going to be these storytellers. And if any actors can just really bring this home to where it is just going to be something that people just are in awe of, it's these two. Like, there was no other actors. So I was just, even when my agent's like, okay, it's not the biggest budget, blah, blah, I'm like, I don't care. And I went back to like, they're going to pay me to do this. That's amazing. So yeah, so that was, yes. So I did, absolutely. I took it for everyone involved. And then Claudio Miranda, which is the DP, and he won an Oscar for Life of Pi. Like, I mean, that movie, it was such an honor to just be part of that group. So, yeah.
Was there, I mean, obviously you're dealing with Hollywood legends. Is there a difference for you dressing male actors as opposed to female actors?
Not
or
at
is it
all.
basically the same job?
It's the same job. I mean, sometimes it's the same job. Sometimes there's certain male actors that you wouldn't think are really particular about certain things that are. And then there's female actors that you would assume are really particular about certain things, and they aren't at all. So it really, truly is the same job.
Well, I love the fact that, we saw Jodie Foster. She was just in the new season of True Detective and being in Naiad. So she's out. She's also been a director herself.
Yes.
And I what I love about herself, too, is both her and Annette Bening are letting themselves, age gracefully, and they look incredible, and they can either glam up or they can play normal people, which is a very great way to be, very, very versatile. But you've also worked at the same time. You did work with Sylvester Stallone. So it's like Jodie Foster and Sylvester Stallone, to me, both of them legends. But when you work with someone like Sly, I would think that he would be more particular, because obviously he's directed, he's got these characters that he's been cultivating for so many years, and he has a great sense of personal style, a great sense of panache. But when you work with someone like him, does he defer to you, or does he micromanage how he wants to look because he's so aware of his image?
I wouldn't say micromanage at all. I do with Sly. I mean, I put together some illustrations and some looks. He definitely wants to know what he's going to be getting into, meaning he wants to know ahead of time that you're on the same page with him before the project happens. So I was hired on that. And then I went to his house with my ACD, and I just showed him all the illustrations and I showed him everything. And he's just cool. He's just like, yeah, I'm like I don't want it to fit like this, and I want it to fit like this. And yeah, like I'll wear a hat here, and I'll wear, like, sure, like a big hoodie, and you just, take down notes, and it's because it's his character, and then he knows what he wants things to fit like, and what it's going to look like on screen. So yeah, so you just kind of like vibe like that with him, and then it was fine.
Oh, that's great. I mean,
you know what I mean? Like you got to when they speak. When Sly speaks, or even Tom Hardy, like in the very beginning, or even Annette and Jody, and they speak and they say something about like, I'd like it to fit like this, then it needs to fit like that. So
right.
Yeah. Which is great, which is my job.
Well, and then you went back and you worked with David Ayer 2 more times after Bright. You worked on The Tax Collector, which is a great film. I'm a big David Ayer fan, I think, and now most recently, with Beekeeper, back with Jason Statham, that movie was a lot of fun. That looked like, the clothes in that film. Yeah. When you have a relationship with the director, how does that develop between the two of you, and how did your relationship with David Ayer evolve from doing Bright to doing The Tax Collector to now doing Beekeeper? Can you finish each other's sentences? Does he sort of give you an overview of what he wants and then leaves you to your own devices to go? How does that work for him? How do you work with him?
Yeah, well, David is he's very specific and very into the way that the clothes look in the movies. So there's certain directors that just basically, they say to you, they're like, I don't really know what I want, but I kind of want it to look like this. And you have to keep giving them options and options. And then one of those options will be right. And then there's David, which he will give you the broad strokes of what he wants this to look like. And so like with Bright, he would give me the broad strokes, and sometimes it would be, but the details too of like the shoelaces and all that stuff. So from working with him from that to Tax Collector, which again, broad strokes, we had a lot less money on tax because that was kind of his passion project.
Yeah.
There was, and then, he lets me kind of do my thing, and same with Beekeeper. So, David isn't one that's just going to go on and on and on. Like he's really specific, and he will get he'll shoot out like a couple of very, very fine-tuned details. And I like his vibe of just his aesthetic. I think he likes the aesthetic that I brought him. So yeah, so he gives me strokes of like, this is kind of what I want the Beekeeper suit to look like. And this is kind of what I want like Anisette to like, this is the vibe of Anisette. So then I just go off illustrations and illustrations and illustrations and illustrations and present that to him. And I think now, because we both have this kind of crazy aesthetic where it's just, we like the nuts and bolts, and not to have too many loose, like empty spaces on someone's clothing and body and that sort of thing. Like he just it's just a lot of candy on the screen. So that's kind of how I work with him, but he's great to work with. And Beekeeper was just a fun movie to watch and a fun movie to do. And he also lets you kind of like push the limit. So he's, he knows when the movies need to have like an elevated sense of style. And so then I know so far what that elevated sense is that he's looking for. So that's kind of like how we've been working together.
Oh, yeah. Beekeeper also has a great aesthetic. From the cinematography to the production design to everything that you did. It's a movie that oozes cool.
It's just,
if that makes sense. And
it's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's become a big hit. I think everybody was surprised at how much money it made. And you have Jeremy Irons is in that movie.
I know.
Jeremy Irons is one of my favorite. If I'd have to talk to him about Dead Ringers the entire time that I worked with him. But, the guy he's a villain in a Die Hard movie. You gotta love Jeremy Irons. And but it was when you're doing something like that, and you have a lot of different kinds of characters, and it's kind of like another heightened reality, not like Bright, but still you get a little bit more leeway to do funky stuff. I guess.
Yeah.
What kind of research do you do when you're going to create something like Beekeeper? Do you go back and look at, I don't know, rock stars, or do you go look at spies, or what how do you decide your aesthetic, the overall aesthetic for a movie like Beekeeper?
Well, we have like the color palette they want to go with. So it's just like really punchy, poppy colors.
Right.
Then honestly,
Do you get that from the cinematographer or David Ayer himself or production designer?
David. David does the same thing to me that he does to David knows what that movie is going to look like. So whether it's costume design, cinematography, production design, like he can see it already. So then he gives the notes and then you just follow those notes and kind of then create everything to make it all, work in unison. So, but some of the characters I looked at, honestly, if it was going to be someone like super crazy, loud, and obnoxious, I think I looked at some of the guys in the WWE or the UFC, like those kind of fighters.
Yes.
Sometimes when they're, walking around after the fights or before the fights and they're all kind of peacocked out. There's one, I don't remember his name, but he always would have, I forgot his name, but he would always have something on his suit. Like they're all custom made suits, but sometimes I think one time he had his face on his suit. So his suit was his face, like a bunch of his faces. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's obnoxious. Like, that's good. So then I bring those boards to David and I'm like, kind of like this. And he says, absolutely. So then I try to figure out what would be the most obnoxious suit ever. Well, this guy thinks he's amazing. So what about goat? Like, that's a term. Like, how pulpy is that? Like, oh, this guy thinks he's the goat. So he has a suit that's printed with a bunch of goats and then the word goat. So showed that to David. David's like, it's great. Make the font bigger. It's great. And then I have that fabric printed and then the suit's made. So that's what I love about David's movies is a lot of the characters, you end up kind of making it like a superhero suit. It's like,
right.
You don't make a ton. There's not a ton of things in these fittings. There's one or there's a few because it gets so specific before the actor even gets in there with what they're going to wear. So that's what's really fun. Honestly, I think some of the obnoxious, which is before he became who he is right now. But I think some of the boards I've showed David of just someone that just is really peacocky is Travis Kelce. And this is way before the Taylor Swift thing.
Right.
Because I'd be like, look at this guy, getting off the plane. Look at it. I think his outfits are awesome, but they definitely are specific. So that's another template I use. So yeah.
Well, it's someone like Travis Kelce, if you watch that documentary with the brothers and he's cultivated, he is a character.
Yes.
And I like people who understand their brands and play into that. Because I think that makes the whole thing fun anyway. And like you said, he was that way pre-Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah. Same with Russell Westbrook. So, because my husband is a huge sports fan. So that's the one thing that I've learned is sometimes when I'm just I'm talking out loud, I'm like, oh, I need this kind of a look. He'll just start riffing off oh, this guy. And it's just and I look him up, oh my God, it's just amazing. So yeah, I get a lot of my inspiration from the athletes when they are going to or from their games.
Well, yeah, and even in I love sports movies. Give me Oliver Stone's Any Given Sunday. It's because sports movies always have the civilian look for their athletes, and I love that. That's part of the appeal because, like you said, they're kind of superheroes.
Yeah, they're kind of superheroes.
And that makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So again, and I have to just because I love these movies, like Greenland. You're dealing with normal people. I know it's Gerard Butler, and he's been in the 300, all that. He's amazing. But in a movie like Greenland, people have to be normal, everyday people. Yeah. So when you go from doing a Bright to something like Greenland, I'll watch any movie where comets are going to blow up the earth. Right. Give me Armageddon, give me Deep Impact. I'll watch it all. So Greenland was a movie that I'm catnip for me. I'm great. But when you're doing something like that, you don't get the creative juice that you might get from working on a David Ayer movie or something like that, when you have to then sort of downshift and make people look every day. Mm-hmm. How is that for you? And is it still a creative challenge?
It's still a creative challenge because, you want to make sure for the movies like that, what's happening is the world is ending, and that's crazy enough. So you have to make sure that the clothes are based in reality and are grounded. So I guess, is it challenging? And I guess it's challenging in that way. It's just it's like apples and oranges. With that one, there was just so much, there was so much military, and there was so much background, so many background in that kind of a movie.
Yeah.
But that's also a movie that I worked with the director. It's funny because Rick Roman is the director, and I just was emailing with him last week. He's starting in Greenland too.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy about that. So, but that was the second movie I'd done with Rick. So again, like I kind of understood his aesthetic, and honestly, and this is what I just think about any sector of this business. It's going to be creative, but it's also, there's going to be times that it's not going to be mind-blowing creative. And so you have to just enjoy it. And I just enjoy costume design. I enjoy going on location. I enjoy doing the fittings. I enjoy working with a team. I enjoy finding fabric and trying to make the perfect jacket for Gerard Butler, which is, it looks pretty plain, but, we had to go down to mood and, picked out the perfect fabric and had it dyed. And, it was just one of those things that all of that's fun, regardless of how it ends up looking. If it just looks like he just threw on a regular jacket,
right,
or like Rita Repulsa. So it's like you have to really kind of enjoy what you do, and I really, really enjoy what I do. So any level that I'm doing at, like Naiad, like if you look at Naiad, like that's a lot of shorts and t-shirts and bathing suits and bandanas for Jody and stuff like that. And so it's like, but that movie was so much fun. It's just the camaraderie of the industry is what I love too. So it's just kind of it's a little of both worlds, which is nice. Very fun. Very fortunate.
Right. Well, you've had I really love the career that you've had. It's been diverse in terms of the different kinds of movies you've worked on and the people you've worked with. It's great. And I guess we always end these interviews by asking people, obviously the business is changing. The advent of AI, how is that going to change design work? I don't know. I produce things myself, and it's a weird place to be, I think. But actors are always going to need to be dressed. So costume designers, I think, are going to be safe, at least for a while. I don't know about writers. but
Well, and I feel for some of these illustrators, because I was doing a presentation last week, and the stuff AI can do now is wild. It's wild.
But my only thing with that is the intent behind it. Like you can do a bunch of stuff and get but I really hope that the intent behind what people are doing is still there, because I think now you're going to have to be more specific, and you're going to have to bring your aesthetic is going to be what people are buying, like it always is. And AI can do a lot of interesting things, but it can't bring a philosophy.
I agree with that. I agree. It's like the wild, wild west out there. Like it's not tuned to anything. So yeah.
And AI is not going to help you develop a relationship with talent. AI is not going to let somebody. AI is never an actor has to trust you to make them look good, and AI can give you pretty pictures, but they can't make sure that it fits.
Yeah, that's true.
So, well, let me ask you: do you have any advice? Now is such a weird, precarious time to want to get into entertainment, because Hollywood is kind of a mess. The business of it all is a mess now that corporate minders are more interested in following analytics than following their gut, which is not how anyone gets successful in Hollywood. You got to follow your gut, but now nobody wants to do that. But that said, what advice do you have for people that want to get into this crazy business?
It's so cliche and cheesy, but I would just say keep going and work on any sort of facet you can, and especially in the beginning. Like I said, I worked for free, and there were some shorts that I did that I ended up paying because there was no money, but I wanted it to look good, and I was broke, and I'm like, okay, whatever. You just keep going, and hopefully this industry will even out a little bit. It's really kind of nerve-wracking thinking about this next potential strike after what happened last year. So I have some thoughts on that, but I just think that, you just keep going, honestly.
Well, Kelli Jones, what projects do you have? Can you talk about anything you are working on now?
There's a couple. Well, last year I worked on this one project called Neo, which is so random. It's not a movie. It's a company that's building kind of these worlds out in Saudi Arabia. And so there's islands that are being built that are being overseen by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So when I got this call, I'm like, what? So I was designing uniforms for what the staff is going to wear over there. So
wow.
during the strike, that's what I ended up doing. So now it's in the process of the hotels haven't quite been built yet. So then it's the next process of that. After that will be the manufacturing of those things. So
they're trying to build a huge studio facility in Saudi Arabia too. They have inflatable sound stages.
I mean, it's crazy. I've seen some of these decks and I just can't even believe that it's real what they're doing over there. So, besides that, honestly, there's a couple of projects coming up that I'm, potentially going to be working on. But really, I just finished a project in Atlanta, and I just feel that the industry is still really finding its footing right now. I mean, most of the people that I talk to, like I went to the Costume Designer Awards last week, and most of the people I talked to haven't even worked in over a year. And now it's still very, very slow, and it's very nerve-wracking for a lot of people. I mean, myself included, just because I'm seeing this new AI stuff, this Sora or whatever, and it's just like, ooh, okay, what's going to be the future for the entertainment industry in 5 to 10 years? So, yeah. So, am I working on anything now? No, I just wrapped something a couple weeks ago, but yeah, it's just, the industry is a little scary right now. So,
no, it is. Sora's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I always say that I think authenticity is going to be the currency of the rest of the 21st century, and I think people are going to get quite bored. I mean, if people are going to start self-inserting themselves into their favorite movies, like recreate Star Wars, but me as the star. I mean, we're going to have to go through that, and you'll be able to hit a button and get your own movie kicked out. But I think eventually, people are going to get bored of that. They're going to. I hope anyway.
I do too. And I looked at it, and it's scary, but it's not there yet. It's not there now. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's ways to like curb it and turn it around to again stay with what's authentic here. So
it's true. Well, listen, I want to thank you. This has been so much fun speaking with you. Thank you for coming on to the Designing Hollywood podcast. And again, big fan of your work.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing everything you do next.
All right. Well, this has been a blast. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks very much. And thank you to our very impressive sponsor.
Eastern Costume is a full-service costume house and wardrobe supply company. We specialize in military, police, and civilian wardrobe, ranging from the 1920s to the present day. We have military uniforms ranging from World War I to the present day and can fully customize any of these with insignia, buttons, pins, props, and more. We offer a wide range of props from flight helmets, bulletproof vests, and backpacks to civilian jewelry, hats, and shoes. We have a great team here at Eastern Costume, and our goal is to become an extension of your wardrobe department and facilitate all of your production needs.
A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from the John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeekSingularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.